go straight into it.
Yes.
The spat between Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and the Hawks has been described as a watershed moment for the African National Congress, coming on back of the poor showing in the elections, particularly in the metros. Now we have comrades pitted against comrades. What is happening in the ANC?
I think we must separate issues firstly. Let me start off by saying that Minister Gordhan is probably one of the most respected finance ministers we've had. Secondly, he is also respected amongst the cadreship of the ANC. Thirdly, him and the President of South Africa and the President of the ANC have a relationship that dates back to the early 70s. So amongst the things that people say, you have to sift out what's fact and what's fiction. The issues around the Hawks and Minister Gordhan is also nothing to do with the National Treasury, frankly speaking, or his position now as Finance Minister, but has everything to do with an investigation that dates back to when he was the Commissioner of SARS and dates back to a belief that the establishment of an investigative unit within SARS to presumably look at whether there was any wrongdoing on the part of any South African, but the origin of that unit is also a little bit difficult for many who are doing the investigations and doing the analysis, and that is that it dates back to the protection of a particular individual's tobacco interests in South Africa against...
Who is this individual?
Well, it's the British Tobacco Company. This is our understanding.
Saying Johan Rupert?
Or
the Ruperts?
Or it would be the Rupert family, and it would be, but that in itself is not incorrect. Obviously, we cannot have a situation where there's contraband being smuggled in to our country from anywhere else. I think the problem, the question that needs to be answered now is, you know, Minister Gordhan is an upstanding, upright and honest man. Now, when Comrade Jacob Zuma was Deputy President of South Africa and he was relieved of his post, he was called, before he was relieved, he was called to the Scorpions to answer 32 questions in their office. He did that. Many of us are asking, why can Minister Gordhan not simply answer the questions? If he's innocent, that will be the outcome of that.
Part of that narrative, is that many people, since the latest saga has broken out between the minister and the Hawks, that there is a perception in some sections of our society that the minister is projecting himself as being above the law.
Well, I've seen that. I've also heard that the COSATU Secretary General, Begin Chalinchal, is saying that. But up to date, Pravin Gordhan has never projected himself above the law, except in this case, you know.
Why?
That is the matter that is of critical importance. Right now, what concerns many of us who support Comrade Pravin in the work that he's doing is that what will happen if the NPA decides to charge him? He's now got a judge, he's got Advocate Bezos talking on his behalf, and this has become an international campaign against South Africa. What happens when there is a correct jurisprudence approach where he is perhaps charged? And God forbid that that ever happens. But, you've always got to look at tomorrow. Now, the problem that we face is that the perception that the president is plotting against his own Minister of Finance. That cannot be true, because why would you appoint somebody in December that you are going, 2015, that you're going to plot against in August 2016?
Part of that narrative is that the events of December 2015.
Yes.
The appointment of former Minister Desmond Royan,
Yes.
And the subsequent reappointment of Pravin Gordhan as finance minister. Part of the narrative is that the president believed that his hand was forced because of the outcry, the
Yes.
markets, etc.
Yes.
And in retrospect, he should have stuck with his original decision.
Yes.
Because the matter is now dragging on, the impact on the economy, the impact on the ANC most certainly, and on our society is taking a different tangent.
Even if the president's hand was forced, as people say, why would he choose this particular individual? He had other people who would have equally been able to be the Minister of Finance. So he chose Pravin, and he was happy to choose him. And so the forcing of the hand issue is neither here nor there.
Why didn't he appoint him in the first instance instead of Desmond Royan?
Because I think that, if you recall, Minister Gordhan was appointed as the Minister for Local Government. And because of the trust that is held in him, we were going towards a local government election. We knew that. So you put a cadre in place that is really solid and that you trust very much to do that job. And that's the level of trust that the president had in Pravin Gordhan. So the point about the hand being forced and so on, I think the issue that we must face is it is quite incorrect for civil society and the banks and business in South Africa to wish to determine who the Minister of Finance must be infinitum in this country. In Madiba's day, they had their way because their man was put in place. When Trevor Manuel was appointed, Trevor Manuel originally came from the ranks of Mobil Oil. So they trusted him because he came from one of their own companies, monopolies that were in the country. They knew him in one way or another. What happens next if there's another president who does not appoint a Minister of Finance that is from the ranks of big business in South Africa? Are we going to see the same thing happening all the time? And I think this is a matter that we as the ANC need to clarify with the banking industry and with the captains of industry as they are called. What is the impetus that would make somebody a good Minister of Finance?
Minister Gordhan is not an outsider.
No.
I mean, he comes from the ranks of the struggle.
Yes.
He's been through a lot, as he himself has indicated. Why do you think he's responding in the manner which he's responding? Has there been any engagement with the ANC leadership over and above the president being president of the country? For the top six, for example, has there been a detailed engagement? Because his reaction right now is not something new. We've seen it previously.
Yes.
The reports of his address to his staff in Treasury on Friday, for example, where he's quoted as saying that he's fighting for the Mandela kind of scenario versus, and he'll give his life essentially, for if the country is taken over by thieves. Now, is this the kind of conduct one would expect from a deployed cadre, a senior cadre for that matter, in the African National Congress?
I think that firstly, I can't speak for him, so I don't know what the origin is of his action. But from a distance, one must say that he's had conversations with individual members of the officials. He's also had conversations with a number of NEC members. The problem that we must overcome is the one where Pravin Gordhan feels that his personal integrity is impinged by having been questioned by the Hawks. Now, firstly, the Hawks can question anybody in this country. The Scorpions had the same authority. The Hawks are an investigative unit. They don't ask anybody's permission to investigate a matter. They do it. You know, a number of us, for instance, we get told on a daily basis that we're all being investigated. Things are being looked at as to whether you have shares anywhere. Well, you know, people like myself, I don't have any shares. I actually don't worry. If anybody wants to, welcome, come along. I think the issue is an issue of personal integrity and the feeling that his personal integrity is being impinged, and therefore he's fighting back. But the manner in which one fights back must never divide the government. And I think that this is what Deputy President Ramaphosa says the other day. But I also think that when the finance minister says that he will fight with his life against thieves, then I would laud that and say, yes, absolutely. Then let's do it to everyone. Let's go across the board, Minister. Let's not leave any stone unturned. Even if you have to investigate your own family, you must do so. Even if you have to investigate your best friends that you know for years and years and years, then you must do so. But is it correct that National Treasury gives itself that task? Or are there other agencies who should be trusted to do that? And the concern I have is that that gives the impression that one arm of government is fighting another arm of government. And whether that concern is correct or not correct is something that we must also deal with. You see, when President Zuma is investigated, there is no hue and outcry, except from us within the ANC. Business does not say, but how do you investigate our president in the manner that you're doing? Court case after court case, President Zuma goes through, and yet, if there's anyone who's being pursued in this country for almost 10 years now, then it is the president. Mm-hmm. The opposition made the president the campaign for the local government election. They packaged it. They used the Concord outcome. They brought about the court case against what they call the spy tapes. Matters unrelated. The spy tape matters got nothing to do with President Zuma. That's a matter between the DA and the NPA. But it's coupled together. And then recently, at the behest of the economic freedom fighters, the question of rape trials and rape cases are reignited, and a big debate in Parliament about rape and the ANC's non-committal to women who are raped. I want to correct that and say, you know, for many of us, the concept of rape is a violent crime against women. And there's no ANC woman who can ever stand back if somebody has truly been raped and has been violated. The fact that this young woman is spirited out of the country, the question must be asked, why spirit her away? If there is genuinely a matter, bring her back. If you want to open it, open it. There was a trial, and there was no evidence to find that there was in fact rape, but that it was consensual. Painful as that is for someone like me to say. I mean, I'm pained by that, because what must be painful for this young person is that her name is again embroiled in a controversy concerning the president, inspired by the former Minister of Intelligence. Now, if there is any kind of a broad analysis that must be made, that for us, that is the question why. So people then step out and they say, President Zuma must go. That is the call of the EFF. That's what the EFF put down as a condition for them to have any kind of a discussion with the ANC in local government for coalition.
But the call for President Zuma to go, I mean, it's more than the EFF.
Oh, yes.
You know, what we are witnessing is a growing kind of opposition, particularly after the ANC's performance in the election. Of course, before the elections,
yes,
with the controversy over Nkandla and a whole range of other issues, his leadership was already being questioned. But since the the Hawks Praveen Gordhan debate, now all of a sudden you are seeing veterans in ANC, Sipo Pachana, who made this call at the late Reverend Stofile's funeral, last Thursday. He was very blunt about it. How widespread is that groundswell? Is there any substance to it, one? Two, there's also talk about a protest outside Lutuli House in the coming days. Are we seeing an embryonic kind of move for regime change?
Let me start answering the question from its origin point. Firstly, I think there is a movement within the ANC, which has always been there since Polokwane, for the removal of President Jacob Zuma. Now you have somebody very vocal like Walter Msimang, a former DG of Home Affairs, who has in this last year and a half consistently written articles that question the capability of the leadership of the ANC. You have had clerics coming to Lutuli House to call for the president to resign. You have had people who call themselves former commanders and commissars coming to Lutuli House to call for the president to resign just before the election of 2016. I mean, months ago, but it's running up to a campaign. We have seen the call for the president to resign linked to the fees must fall. Hashtag Zuma must go, and Blade Mzimandi must go as well. Yes, there is a groundswell. Groundswell being, how big is this groundswell? Since day before yesterday, we've received the SMSs that indicate, first of all, there was a Facebook page by a Rosalind Greef, a former MMC of the Johannesburg City Council, a member of the ANC, who makes the call that we must call for Zuma to go, she puts it, we must go and occupy Lutuli House, and we must link this to the fees must fall, and the NEC must also be asked to go. The second set of messages comes from somebody called Bonolo, who then makes it more explicit, and they say that they will be occupying Lutuli House on the 5th of September. Now, the point is that the ANC is a very large organization, present in 4,800 local areas of the country, present in 53 regions of the country, present in 9 provinces of South Africa. The call for the early conference came from the Secretary General of the ANC Women's League during our NEC meeting, and Mr. Jackson Mthembu. It's no use us trying to pretend and say that this didn't happen. It's out there in the open. It did not have sufficient support in the NEC, and therefore the NEC did not make such a decision. And then immediately thereafter, the Youth League makes that call for an early conference with no explanation of their motivation whatsoever. They consistently make the call, and they mention the names of people who must be the next leadership of the ANC. So they do what they think is the correct thing to do, but they completely forget that the place where people will make the decision about a next set of leaders is the branches of the ANC. And normally, whether you're going to call an early conference or not, that process cannot be undermined. It will still have to be branches that make nominations. It will still have to be going through the processes of the ANC, where the nominations and the end result will come. Whatever our feelings are right now about this NEC, what the NEC did, it looked at the November last year research results. It looked at the research of ANN7. It looked at the research of Ipso Machino and put it all together in a presentation, and then examined why we would have had such a dismal result in the metros of South Africa. We looked at the fact that almost 500,000 people migrate from rural areas to the urban areas, namely eThekwini, Johannesburg and Cape Town. We also looked at the issues that are top of mind for the people of the metros. Number one is jobs. Number two is crime. Number three is corruption.
But should that not have been done before the local government elections? I mean, the losses are quite significant.
Absolutely.
Particularly in the Gauteng metros.
Yes.
I think a lot of people, I mean, when you do a bit of an analysis, saying that it's because of the kind of internal, leadership issues within the ANC, within the alliance. It went into this election very disorganized.
Well, I was going to come to that. We also looked at ourselves and we analyzed the fact that, for instance, in Tshwane, what caused us damage was the infight between the chair and his deputy. In the Nelson Mandela Metro, Danny Jordan is there for a year and makes a massive impact, turns it around, but the ANC structure in Nelson Mandela Bay is not a healthy one. It's an interim structure, and the problem that we faced was that within the structure of the ANC, there were people still fighting about who the mayor should be, even after the national leadership had pronounced. And there was a deliberate call for people to stay away in the larger township areas. So let's face this and blame ourselves. We're not blaming anybody else. Thirdly is the constant negativity towards the president of the ANC from various sources of people. There's a highlight is made of the article by 3 days before the election by former President Kgalema Motlanthe. And we say, look, that's his view. It came at that time, but he influences the thinking of people. It is the constant non-adherence to the internal processes of the ANC and the changing of candidates by regions, provinces, and the Nationalist Committee, as well as our steering committees at a local and screening committees at a local level. So the fault line was very much internal. And so whether we analyze broadly and we say there was a great big conspiracy against the ANC, no. The ANC was punished by its own membership.
How is it going to self-correct? I mean, for example, the issue, you've mentioned it already, the debate about an early elective conference. Given the current state of play within the ANC, it's the tensions with the SACP in particular. You think, one, is the ANC ready for an elective conference? Would it cause more divisions? Would it, ahead of the elective conference, if it happens, whether it's early or in December, would it just be a papering over the internal kind of cracks? And the third issue is, and the ANC Youth League has spoken about it, that if there's an elective conference early or in December, the issue of slates needs to be dealt with.
Absolutely.
What would be your take on that?
Well, the NEC discussed that matter as well. And the broad view in the NEC was that we really have to try to achieve an elective conference without slates and also achieve an elective conference without controversy. But that requires and means that maximum unity is what the ANC needs, and everybody has to be participating. And that would include Msimang, Motlanthe, and former President Mbeki, and all the people that support them individually and collectively. It would also mean that we would have to cut out the measurement that is done at the provincial and a regional level, and that all nominations come directly from branches. And that means we have to change our methodology of actually selecting national leaders. Many of us support that perspective, the all-in-one. Leave nobody out, give everybody the opportunity to have a say, make sure that the voice is carried throughout every structure of the ANC, and make sure that it's a strong voice. Right at this moment, I would say, as somebody who's in the SGO, we're not ready. Right now, we're not ready. No, people are still reeling from the hard work of the elections, and in other provinces, in 7 provinces of the 9, people have done fairly well, and we mustn't undermine that. Gauteng and the Western Cape have not done well, but let me just say that. We would not be ready, but if forced to have, if there's a decision done in the correct way, to have an elective conference or even a consultative conference, the ANC springs into action. All the work that needs to be done will be done. Hopefully we can do this away from the factional approach. We have to admit that the manner in which the NECs in the last 20 years have come about has been factional. It hasn't ever been an NEC that truly represents the branch members' views. It has been, right from the very beginning, preferences that were the national leadership's preferences in the very beginning, and following that, the powermongers in the ANC sought to put out people that would serve their interests in an NEC, or a PEC or an REC.
But coming, I mean, that's precisely the point. I think in many ways, this battle that
for the soul,
for the heart and soul of the ANC is encapsulated by this controversy with the finance minister, with Pravin Gordhan. I mean, when you listen to the SACP, for example, Solly Mapaila, is quoted again in the weekend press as saying that something fundamental needs to happen, around the issue with the finance minister, and it's indicative of the attitudes within the ANC. And his particular problem is with President Jacob Zuma. He says when President Jacob Zuma, was elected for the first term, he was very consultative in his decision-making process. But increasingly, he seems to have dumped his alliance partners. Even he's gone as far as saying that even he doesn't consult his comrades in Lutulias, yourself, the rest of the top 6, the NEC has been isolated. And he has a parallel process in terms of decision-making. For example, I mean, he's on record as saying that, he consults the Guptas. And I'll come back to the Gupta issue later, in terms of his appointments, in terms of his policy issues. How do you read it?
My reading is that the president does consult. For example, when he appointed his cabinet, he consulted the president of COSATU, Blade Nzimande, and the SG of the ANC sits in on the appointments once it's done. I think the problem came in December of 2014 with the appointment of Des van Rooyen, where there was a view that the president had not consulted the alliance partners about the appointment of a new Minister of Finance. But I'm not sure that it is entirely correct to say that he did not speak to the officials of the ANC. From the Thursday before the appointment of Comrade Pravin, there was constant discussion and contact. The president did call each one of us individually to say that I'm appointing Des van Rooyen as my Minister of Finance. Okay, whether that means that he should first have sat down with us and asked, what we think, he's not actually ever done that before, or whether or not he took a decision and then he informed us. On the issue of the appointment of Pravin Gordhan, very much in consultation with the president about who he should find as the replacement for Des van Rooyen. And it was over a space of 48 hours, actually, frankly speaking. So no one can claim that they were the hero of the moment in that issue. It was a consideration about the fallout of the Rand and so on, which I just want to say one thing to you, Ricky. Of concern to me is the tying of the rand to the personalities of individuals. It can't be right. I think that we have asked as the ANC that there needs to be a look at why the rand is so jumpy. What creates this this jumpiness in the rand? You know, the rand is the subject of bartering in the open market. Our Reserve Bank needs to cushion our rand, but the Reserve Bank itself is privately owned. And so we have a difficulty. On the issue of does the president consult the Guptas or not consult the Guptas, I must say I don't know. And that would be the truth. I would find it very interesting if he actually appointed people after consulting the Gupta family or any individual family in the country for that matter. That is not Jacob Zuma's style. That is definitely not his style. I have no doubt that he has a friendship with the Gupta family. That I have no doubt of. They've said so. He has said so. So does that friendship extend to anything beyond a friendship? One must leave it there. But what I find unacceptable is this notion of running out of our country, one family. So all other multinational companies now, will the same happen to them? What happens to black companies who are successful in this country? Does it mean that a black company who does not have a white partner in that company stands no chance, and is not a front, stands no chance? I think those are the questions we must be asking, is what is the actual issue? And if the Gupta family has done anything wrong and illegal, why not charge them? Take them to courts, take them and charge them formally, not dismiss them by rumor and innuendo and calling people thieves. You know, I am told of another instance where a newly appointed mayor was also described as just a thief in passing. And my question is this right? Is the I will die to get rid of thieves, meaning that we're going to have a bow and arrow that we point in any direction and shoot? Or is this going to be done properly, correctly, and will people have a chance to defend themselves, not just be accused? And as much as the finance minister feels aggrieved for being accused and feeling that his integrity is impugned, he too cannot be at the center of impugning the integrity of a range of other people, members of the ANC, members of the NEC of the ANC, cabinet ministers, as well as mayors and premiers. Where there is evidence, let us do the right thing. And you know, Andre Krill of Saktu phoned me a week ago and said, I must do the honorable thing and resign. And my question to Comrade Andre is, on what basis is your request being made to an individual member of the NEC of the ANC? Is this a decision made by COSATU? COSATU says something completely different. But there's a whole range of people doing this kind of putting pressure on various individuals, you know, resign here,
but
resign
isn't that
there.
precisely the point? I think you alluded to it again earlier. This battle for the heart and soul of the ANC. Is it what? It simply cannot be that, you know, one family, you know, the Guptas, you know, you get the sense that they become the soft targets in a broader battle between the different forces, you know, within the ANC, within the alliance, for the control of what happens in the ANC and per se what happens in government.
I think they're a convenient scapegoat, frankly speaking. If you think back to pre-Polokwane, think back to Mangaung conference, there were no Gupta names there. And yet that was very much a slated, when President Mbeki was elected as president, it was a slate. I was on that slate. You know, I was. There were people who were excluded, including, for example, the exclusion of Mantash at that time from the national leadership of the ANC. So the battle for the heart and mind of the ANC has always been there. It will never actually go away because of the size of the ANC, of the legacy of the ANC, and the fact that the ANC has very strong individuals who are in its leadership components throughout its structures, from bottom to top. The only time that the ANC had relative unity for a short period of time was during O.R. Tambo's leadership of the ANC, and that was because of the strength of character of Oliver Tambo. Even during Madiba's time, whether people like to hear this now or not, there were factions. There were deep fights that raged in the ANC about leadership battles. About the South African Communist Party and the comments made by Solly Mapaile, I think the right place for those comments would be in a bilateral with the ANC, trashing it out, taking away perception, putting facts on the table, correcting what isn't right. The constant refrain, I saw in a newspaper on Friday that Jacob Zuma is after the Reds. I actually laughed at that because to me that there's so many people in that cabinet.
Well, the SACP is, well, I've said that now. I mean, I see Jeremy Cronin, the deputy minister, is quoted as saying that, or threatened that, all of the SACP deployees to cabinet, for example, are talking about, quitting. This talk about a cabinet reshuffle, because President Zuma is wanting to get rid of the SACP deployees in cabinet because they become an obstruction to his own agenda.
I don't know if that is entirely correct. At the moment, this is the first cabinet where they've been almost a majority of the members of cabinet are from the SACP, or members are party members, one way or another, Politburo or CC members. A lot of them are there. A lot of them hold key positions. There's no talk in the ANC about reshuffling of people at the present time. There's no indication that that might be. So when people say that President Zuma wants to get rid of the Reds, he appointed members of the Communist Party to his cabinet. And when they were appointed, they were not deployees of the SACP. They were ANC members being appointed as members of cabinet. And the fact that they were also in the SACP did not deter the president at all. So I don't wish to be seen to be taking sides because I don't want another 10-hour conversation with Andre Kriel calling me a factionalist. But what I do want to say is that we need to calm down and stop the rumor mongering. We need to calm down and face each other across the table and not make up our own minds about things that we are listening to in corridors. The information peddlers are rife right now. I mean, it's unreal. And added to that is you've got the SMS machinery going, Facebook and WhatsApp. And so if you plug into the WhatsApp conversations, it's horrifying, actually. And you look at that and I ask myself, well, are these members of the ANC or are they from somewhere else? What I can say is that ANC members and cadres must begin to defend this organization. We must understand that the enemy is within us now, but that enemy is very powerful also outside of us. And we're actually living out the agenda of what EFF and the DA would like to have. The demise of the ANC is the growth of the EFF and also the DA, and they're in a coalition at the moment. And that is an interesting coalition, by the way, but it is also a coalition that will stand or fall based on the strength of the ANC's unity. And the call we have to make is a call to every ANC member out there. No matter your disgruntlement, Now's the time to come back into the organization. Let's sort things out internally. Let's find ourselves and let's build a strong ANC, not an ANC that is divided and weak. And we should not give actual fact to the prophecy made by O.R. Tambo that the only thing that will destroy the ANC is the ANC itself.
But this destruction of the ANC, surely events have overtaken. You know, there was a particular place in the history of the ANC in terms of its relationship with the SACP and COSATU, for example, and SACTU, its predecessor. Right now, this alliance, you know, the SACP is, you know, the perceptions that are out there is that the SACP is at war with the ANC, or sections of the SACP and sections of its leadership. Is it not time for the ANC to just focus in terms of, as part of this rebuilding process, for it to go alone? It can have a relationship with the SACP, it can have a relationship with COSATU, but in terms of the ANC being the ruling party in the country, is it not time for it to go alone? This constant sniping of the consultative process, etc. Wouldn't you not have a stronger ANC emerging if it starts applying itself in terms of the ANC thinks it's right for the country?
I think that we're stronger when our policies are the product of a broad consultative process, as they have been for the past years. And even when we differ, once we come out of a national conference of the ANC where our alliance partners are also present, we all actually are loyal to those policies, but from a different point of view. The pull and push within us is quite healthy. For instance, we cannot continue to discuss a national minimum wage infinitum. It's a decision that we investigate the modalities thereof. So if COSATU doesn't put pressure on the ANC for that, it will mean that the ANC could take very long to implement that. And let's face it, this is also true of the ANC, that while it's a broad church, it has many people with a very conservative, narrow nationalist outlook within it. And the ANC over years has never pandered to that. The ANC has allowed itself to be influenced by COSATU, or SACTU before it, by the SACP, and of course the advent of the civic movement in South Africa brought new energy into the alliance. It's not in our interest to break this alliance, because the ANC's primary objective is to unite the people of South Africa. And in order to do that, you've got to be able to influence the broadest possible sections of society. And when we look at the differences that are raised by, amongst others, Solly Mapaile, primarily they are based on questions of deployment, of representativity, of disagreement on, of course, disagrees on the question of the president. He has a right to do so. The SACP has a right to discuss the leadership of the ANC in the SACP's meetings. The ANC has an equal right to discuss our concerns about the behavior of, let's say, the SACP in places like Alfred Nzo region in the Eastern Cape, where the SACP district secretary launched a separate campaign to the ANC and actually fielded independent candidates with a emblem that was not the SACP emblem, but nevertheless the suggestion was that this is an SACP product. So we can discuss that, and we should discuss it. And we should do so honestly, robustly, without fear and without favor. That will make us stronger, not weaker.
I just want to very quickly deal with this issue around this immense influences this Gupta family allegedly has over ANC policy, government policy, legislative processes, appointments. And I'm trying to draw an analogy. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan started a process for the introduction of a sugar tax, right, to deal with the health of the nation. What we've seen is a reaction from big business. Coca-Cola, for example, has talked about disinvestment if government proceeds with the implementation. There's a whole lobby process, a whole campaign that's now been, it has kicked into action. We've seen protests outside the union buildings. We've seen full-page ads in the print media, a whole range of things. Very, very similar to what we had seen when Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma took on the pharmaceutical industry. We've seen it on the anti-smoking or anti-tobacco legislation. Now, is there a bit of a contradiction with what our finance minister and many of his backers are saying? That there's this undue influence by this Gupta family on a whole range of things in the country. But there isn't that same energy, same vigor targeted towards these multinationals, who are waging a public campaign against government. How do you read that?
My reading is that, as you correctly point out, this started with the pharmaceutical industry when the generic medicines were being introduced and they would cost less to the people of South Africa. It was also there when Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma introduced a ban on smoking in public areas. There was a huge fight against the ANC then, and her in particular, by the tobacco industry. As you know, they've got lots of money. And now with the sugar industry, similarly so. To me, that is influence that is negative. Similarly, influence that would be negative for me would be the fact that here we have the Gautrain, and we had to build beautiful roads just for the 2010 World Cup. And who needed to pay for that, and how was it going to be paid for? The Gauteng provincial government makes a decision to build the R21 as it is now, and it's part of a huge integrated transport network, and bonds have to be found, and national government bails Gauteng out. And the opposition has been running their campaign on e-tolls for 2 consecutive campaign seasons. And Mashaba is appointed as a mayor and says, about e-tolls, I don't actually know what to do about that. I can do nothing about it. Now, the challenge I would put is, what if we just all stop paying the e-tolls now? As everybody, let's put that challenge out there. What happens to our government? What if we decide to take irresponsible action that will cause a bond to collapse from various sectors of our society? And you use it only to campaign for an election, then what? OUTA is formed, and NGOs are formed. Zwelinzima Vavi leads that campaign. It's all very good and well, but it creates a huge disturbance in our society. And one of the things that I want to just say in concluding this question is that it is fundamentally important that if there is evidence of this one family called the Gupta family having influenced appointments in legislatures, you mentioned a whole range of, bring it out, let's deal with it. Because from where I'm sitting, I watch the appointments of how people are appointed. At legislative level, your top 25% of a list are the people guaranteed seats in any legislature. Of that would be the people who are who become MECs and so on, are people who are very well known in the organization and have experience. On the National Cabinet, the Gupta family does not sit in on the appointment. The Secretary General does sit in on the appointments. And there's broad discussion with the President and the top 6 officials about who will become his cabinet before the cabinet is in fact appointed. People are asked. Now, I don't know. I want to ask the question again. And I might as well say it very bluntly. Where there is evidence, bring it to the fore. If it is an offence in our country to suggest a name to a person, bring it to the fore and let's deal with that. If that has happened, bring it to the fore. You know, the one that fascinates me the most is the issue about Fikile Mbalula, where Fikile Mbalula says that at some point that he heard from one of the Gupta brothers that he was going to be made a minister. The other side of that story is there was a newspaper article that mentioned his name as a possibility, and the comment to him was, I see that you're going to be the Minister of Sport. Not so that is misconstrued, misdirected and used. The EFF is asking for a judicial commission of inquiry on the Gupta family. That was one of their demands that they made when they had negotiations with the ANC about coalitions. The other demand, which they said was non-negotiable, was that the president must go. And then they said that during the time that we are in a coalition with them, there can be no nuclear contract that is signed. Well, the reality is that there is no nuclear contract, and that we've checked over and over again now. Where's this nuclear contract? Nobody's able to see it or find it. But again, let me say, undue influence is the people who might want that nuclear nuclear contract, who don't want anybody else to be part of it. Undue influence are people who deal with the ANC in a manner that says, you cannot have a health decision on sugar, otherwise we will leave your country. Coca-Cola, not let's sit down and talk, we will leave, disinvest. That is undue influence. Undue influence is the procurement of a private space at the airport of South Africa for private planes to land. Who gave permission? How did that happen? Who's involved in that? Which ANC people have wives that are part of that deal, and that's why it came through? Who's the Black Economic Empowerment partner that made that happen? And yet when people talk loosely and globally, they make it sound like there's a Gupta family involvement, which it isn't. It's actually the Oppenheimer family that is involved.
So we're talking about a much deeper, more complex, set of, scenarios.
We are indeed. I think our country is complex. We must never ever believe that we are not being looked upon by other big powers. We occupy a very strategic geopolitical space on the planet. We have a very long seaboard. We have deep water spaces for people who would want to use them, deep ports. We have a number of things that are in good stead, and we must protect our sovereignty. We must protect our sovereignty from multinationals. We must protect our sovereignty from powerful individual families who live in other countries.
Finally, DSG, just, the issue around Pravin Gordhan, Finance Minister, next couple of days is going to be, you're going to see a ratcheting up of the tension.
Of course.
How do you see it panning out?
Look,
the ANC would be having an officials meeting, I presume, on Monday.
We won't discuss that matter in the absence of the president. I hope not. I hope we will not.
And do you think the president should come back?
The president can't come back now. He's in a program which is important. But I really honestly hope that we do not fall into the trap of discussing this matter in the absence of the president and not hearing his view on the matter. For the rest, what are the facts as they stand now? The facts are that the Hawks have asked Ivan Pillay and others to come to them. We don't know what was said in those rooms. At the moment, these are all allegations. They're not charges, you know. I don't believe that Pravin Gordhan would do anything illegal. And therefore, I honestly think that it would not have harmed him or the country if he had simply done what Madiba did when he was called to go and answer questions when there was the rugby issue,
The Louis
Late issue. If he had simply done what Jacob Zuma did when he went to the Scorpions to go and answer questions, and not create the situation that indicates that he is alone in fighting against some thieves in the country, because we're all fighting those thieves. Whoever those thieves are, they must be brought out, they must be put on the carpet, they must leave the ANC. Thieves must go. Nobody wants the thieves. Let's have the facts of those thieves. And to me, I'm a bit worried that the grandstanding will undermine Comrade Pravin's integrity even more. And I don't want that to happen. Of deep respect for him. We as an ANC, many of us have deep respect for this comrade. I have known about Comrade Pravin for over 30 years, from the time of the UDF days. You know, you don't just lose respect for people overnight. And always has this, I have this in my mind, this is a man of great integrity. And that integrity must come to the fore now. It is about fighting the thieves, but it is also about respecting the institutions of the state. And that's important.
Jessie, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your thoughts. And we hope these issues can be resolved for the larger benefit of the nation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.